I'm a triplet. I have a sister and a brother, and I often see differences in how my brother is treated in comparison to my sister and I. The three of us grew up in the same household, the same town, and even with the same school system, so it's a pretty controlled environment. My brother is more feminine in nature than some other boys. He likes astrology, reading, is emotionally sensitive, and is pretty introverted. In high school, he'll get made fun of for liking astrology or being told to man up if he was sad or upset. He wears his emotions on his shoulders. Our peers didn't get why he couldn't be more outgoing or like more manly activities like football. Because of people trying to fit him into a box of their expectations of what a man is supposed to be, he had an identity crisis for a while, unsure who he really was or how he was supposed to fit into society. In comparison, my sister and I were treated more kindly by our peers, even if we shared some of the same characteristics as our brother. As a society, we need to recognize it's okay if people don't fit into the typical gender roles and to identify toxic behaviors we've rooted into the core of our gender expectations. We also need to learn how to respond in a more positive manner when people don't fit those expectations or take them too far in a toxic direction. I'm going to address issues of toxic masculinity and toxic femininity and how to respond to these behaviors. My brother is usually treated differently by boys in school who exhibited these toxic masculinity traits. In general, toxic masculinity is an umbrella term that represents a set of unspoken behaviors a lot of men are pressured to exhibit in our society, to act manly. To further expand on this definition, I interviewed Dr. Rhonda, UCM's Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies coordinator. She said toxic masculinity is a type of masculinity that is harmful to oneself and others. Just like if you drink something toxic, you put yourself in danger and it might even be fatal. Same for toxic masculinity. This would include needing to be in control over others to your and their detriment, fighting to prove yourself, being emotionally or physically abusive, not going to the doctor even though you're sick because you can't or won't ask for help, not reaching out for help if you're feeling sad or depressed, raising voice to not cry and to not show emotion, calling people names, harassing others who are women or part of the LGBTQ community, and more. These traits are toxic because they're both harmful to other people as well as to the person exhibiting these traits. There are two sides of toxic masculinity we're going to explore. Briefly, we're going to talk about that there's one side, and it's a small group of men, who enjoy exhibiting these behaviors because they like to harm other people. Obviously, these kinds of people need some help moving into more positive behaviors. The other side is the majority, where most men don't want to harm others, but have been taught that these behaviors are what defines him as a man, so he doesn't know how else to act. These behaviors create negative tension within the male where he can't express his true feelings or he feels like he has to pretend he's something he's not. Because of this, it not only affects his mental health, but it also affects the people around him. For example, a man might push away a loved one because he doesn't want to show them how much he loves them because he can't show his emotions. The loved one might question what happened or what they did wrong and end up pushing him away as well due to a lack of communication. In the TED Talk, Why I'm Done Trying to Be Man Enough, actor Justin Baldoni describes his experiences with toxic masculinity. In an effort to move away from toxic masculinity behaviors, Baldoni posted a picture of him and his wife with a caption describing his love for her. One of his followers tagged her boyfriend in the comment section to his post, and the boyfriend responded in a very negative way. Justin Baldoni messaged him, asking him politely why he responded the way he did, because Baldoni is doing research on what it means to be man in today's world. Surprisingly enough, the boyfriend opened up to Baldoni about how he grew up in a Middle Eastern family where displays of affection are mocked, so he doesn't know how to express his feelings and has been trying to learn how to do so. The boyfriend was ashamed that he had reverted back to his normal ways of rejecting public displays of affection. This interaction with Justin Baldoni actually helped the boyfriend address his toxic behavior, and a few weeks later, the boyfriend publicly proposed to his girlfriend. In this case, the behavior is changed and there is a happy ending, but that's not always true. We'll move on to toxic femininity. On the flip side of toxic masculinity, there is toxic femininity. This is a debated topic in the gender studies world because some professionals argue that most feminine traits aren't harmful to others or themselves. I'm including it as a cautionary note that in case it does exist, we should address it in some way. It also seems that professionals debate on the definition of toxic masculinity, which I didn't catch until after I finished writing my speech, so I didn't have enough time to include the second definition. But the second one talks about how women are more aggressive than men and take that to an extreme, but the toxic femininity I'm going to be talking about is submissive form. So through my research, I learned that in the submissive form of toxic masculinity, women reject traditionally male traits in herself. For example, a woman can't be strong, a leader, hide her feelings, or be stoic if she wanted. She has to be weak and let others tell her what to do. Toxic femininity causes the woman to ignore her own needs to a point where it's detrimental to her, but beneficial to the people around her. To add to this, Dr. Williams, a professor of Demetrius of Developmental Psychology at Cornell University, says that toxic femininity and sexism go hand in hand. Sexism is focused on robbing women of status and rights. Toxic femininity is about defining womanhood so shallowly that a woman feels degendered by basic human acts or neutral preferences. Both factors lead to women being compressed into impossibly tight and comfortable shapes. It's obvious to me, however, that a lot of men also feel like they're compressed into uncomfortable shapes when they don't want to express toxic masculinity traits, but feel obliged to. No matter what your gender is, when we exhibit toxic gender traits, we are harming ourselves. Dr. Williams goes on to explain that the big problem in all of this is our society's need to conform to inflexible gender roles. What should we do to create a more positive atmosphere within gender? According to author Kathy Young, a historical response to toxic masculinity is the radical feminist movement, but that can cause problems. Today we see radical feminism, where women flip toxic masculinity on its head and use those exact same traits to put men down instead. This doesn't work because it creates the same ambiguity we started with, just with flipped gender roles. There are multiple steps we can take instead. According to Ina Togel, professor of leadership and organizational change at the IMD Business School, people simply need to be aware of these toxic behaviors. Along with this, people need to kindly speak up in situations where these behaviors are apparent to teach others why their behavior is wrong. People should also be willing to change their own toxic behavior. Most importantly, we need to treat people like people. We need to treat everyone with respect and kindness and to oppose harm to oneself and others. In summary, toxic masculinity and toxic femininity causes people to accept a set of behaviors that are detrimental to their health. Everyone needs to work together in identifying when these behaviors happen and to take steps to prevent them from happening again in positive ways. To reduce gender roles, we all need to be willing to work together.